That dynamo you just heard from actually founded this amazing conference 8 years ago. Can we say thank you, Marion? She said to me earlier, when I was stunned at how many women are here, she said, I've done larger groups than this. But for me, it's the largest group of women I think I've spoken to. And I tell you, I think the energy when we're all together like this is pretty stunning. I think we could light up Boston. Maybe not Harvard. It's unusual for me, too, to be here because I have my sister in the audience. Her name is Judith. She has never been convinced I had my act together. So if you see her, would you tell her I'm really doing a good job? Yeah, that'll do it. And you know what else is great about today? All of the men's restrooms have been named women. Do you know how long I waited to be not the only woman standing in the ladies' room? So it's a good day for me. Marion presented my credentials in a rather extravagant fashion, but perhaps I would offer another. Over these long years that I've worked, I think I have really become an expert in how it is men and women behave at work. And that's what we're going to study a little bit today. But I don't consider myself an expert on all those other roles that we play that are so important. Mother, daughter, lover, wife. Especially wife. I was reminded of this recently because I did the Martha Stewart show in pitching the book. And she had some entrepreneurs and I was supposed to give them advice. And before we got started, she surprised me by putting up on the background pictures of my wedding, in which Martha was a bridesmaid. So the live audience was oohing and awing, not about me, about Martha. And just when it was getting really sentimental, Martha said, let's see, which one of your weddings was this? Yes, I'm going to get even somehow. So something about that title, I mean, you notice it's modest. I'd rather be in charge. I really wanted that title to read, I'd rather you be in charge. And that's my mission, to get ever more women in positions of power and in spheres of influence, because your company will benefit and our country will be a far better country. The thing about, we're in heated agreement on that one, and it's so true. Otherwise, I'd be home eating bonbons. Actually, I never even knew what bonbons were. A very interesting thing happened to me when I started working on that title, I'd rather be in charge. A man, as a very literary fellow, came up and he said, you just don't understand titles. You could have had a bestseller if you had called it, I'd rather be on top. That's rather like a man, isn't it? So a very interesting thing happened to me when I was a very young account executive at J. Walter Thompson, an ad agency. I came up green as grass from Texas. And there was only one woman in the company that I could emulate who was in a professional position, and she was over me. She was a creative director. But she was a doozy. She had black hair, black eyes, a very sharp tongue, amazing confidence. We were all a little afraid of her. And I walked down the hall one day, and I could hear her talking, the men laughing. I heard her do an incredibly devastating mockery of my Texas accent. And the men were roaring in laughter. I was paralyzed there in that hall. And for some weeks, I just had trouble speaking, knowing that I was someone to laugh at. And finally, I realized I'm going to have a real short career in advertising if I don't get my voice back. So I went up to the feared woman's office, shut the door. She looked up and frowned at me. And I said, I'm not leaving here until you and I agree that we will unite so that the men can neither divide or diminish us. She looked up and said, what are you doing for lunch? And she took me out and taught me to drink Scotch mist. I did not make it back to the office. And we became friends for life. It was so much fun because when the two of us were together, the men were so nervous. Listen, there's a little aside to that story. When I first started talking about things like this, women over and over would come up to me and say, I am going to take that as a clue to challenge the women in my company who are not supportive of other women. And you know, we have to get on that because there's plenty of reputation and rumor that women don't make great bosses. And maybe one way we can do it is retrain them like that. But what happened that was so interesting about that situation is it took me many years to understand that in that one desperate episode, I had found the pattern of powerful communication. I just didn't understand that it would take me years to be able to do it deliberately. And I want you to start thinking today and now about this pattern. Here's what it consists of. There is clarity, and by that I mean personal clarity. Not the clarity that comes from your PowerPoints or you're mastering the data, but from here. There is memorability. Being memorable means that people can actually hear and retain what you say. And there is persuasion. Clarity, memorability, persuasion. I had it. We will unite. They will not diminish us. And I transformed our relationship. We need to get to that capacity over and over again so that when we stand challenged, tested, we will be ready to speak for ourselves in that way. Now, the reason it is difficult to get there is because that first step, personal clarity, is like one big giant step for mankind. You can spend your life going toward it, but you've got to get better at it every day. So, David White wrote this book that I thought was striking, and he said, we live in 3 continents: work, self, and home. And what I know about us women is we're not very good at self. So when we go to work, we have a tendency to fall into the work, to let the work speak for us. And that's not the right thing. I know about this because I did it for far too long. When I was at J. Walter Thompson, I began to really hit it, and I was a hot shot. I got promoted 6 times in 5 years, and I thought, this is about the work. I'm so good at the advertising, I got the clients, I've got this figured out. But what I didn't know is all in a fairly narrow frame of relationships where we all agreed on the goals and so on. So I'm so good, I think I'll try on the CEO role. And I agree to go to a smaller agency that is slightly broken. I walk in the door, I hit a wall so hard, I began to fail immediately. Because you know what? It wasn't about the work. It was about the relationships. There will come a time in your business life when the relationships will overwhelm the work, and they won't be the relationships that surround the work. They'll be over and beyond it. In this agency, the creative department was very fond of drugging and drinking. You walk down the hall, you could smell pot. I mean, I lost it. The agency had debt, huge debt. And I found out with our structure, they could sue our personal assets. This kept me up every night. The clients were not difficult, they were hostile. I was used to being liked. Here's something really interesting. I noticed that the men down the hall from me, the guys I was going to be CEO over, were not as worried as I was. Listen, I was beyond worried. I was leaving. I saw that I couldn't do it. I got a job offer from another agency, more stable, not the same big title. I was out the door. And one word stopped me. I was reading some reviews the next day of these anonymous reviews, you know how we do with one another. I read, "Charlotte is fearless." I'm the one waking up at 4 a.m. every morning, panicked. And I read on about my bravery with clients and so on. I thought, you know, there are times and ways in which I can be brave. Isn't it possible that we all house both of these things? And I decided to stay, to put my hand in with the people there and help rebuild the agency. But I made another vow. I vowed to find out who Charlotte was. Other than my resume and my great work skills, what was causing these responses, these reactions, these inherent ways of being that came at me when I was dealing with relationships I hadn't encountered yet. My father was an alcoholic. So the drugging and drinking sent me back to being 5 years old again and frightened. I also learned that difficult discussions, as we had at home, could escalate into violence. So I was nervous around this kind of volatility. And because of our unstable family life, debt worried me a great deal more than it did my partners. I began to work on that. I don't want to necessarily carry those things into the office, and they're out of date anyway. I went to Children of Alcoholics. I began to keep a journal and watch myself. I recommend this to you. You need to know who you are as you do your work, so that the whole you emerges. We carry like suitcases on our back, influences, messages, systems we've been given in which we behave in a certain way. You need to look at them and decide what to shed, what to keep, modify. I learned one other thing. We carry in us these powerful traits. They are the things that cause you to have certain strengths and weaknesses, but often you can just skim on the surface of them. I think one trait you have right now, if you thought about it, is one that's sent along from your family, like a genetic pass-along. My family trait was a lethal form of impatience. Not great, but mine. When it worked, it was because I was good at making decisions in a hurry. And when it didn't work, I ruined everything around me. I didn't know enough. The other trait that you have is precious. It's the one that makes you uniquely you. I call it bred in the bone. You want to find that trait. It'll be good when you're operating well, and it'll be bad when you're not in charge of it, when you can't harness it, because it will be heard. So my bred in the bone trait, since the 3rd grade, was, all things being equal, I would just rather be in charge. Now, if you take those two traits, impatience and being in charge, these are not the top 10 list of anyone who wants to marry that woman. Although some men did. Still, think how much power you have when you are the one who can define who you are. When you can say, this is who I am. And you'll never speak with that kind of clarity at that point when you need to mean what you say and you know for whom you speak. So I'm urging you to take this journey. It's what I've used in the book as well as I can. And there are many other ways to do it. But I'm hoping you won't forfeit the right to know yourself, the stranger within, the one who causes these things to happen. You know what we managers do in a room when we're deciding who to promote? We spend about 2 minutes on the work, and then we move into who are they? We repeat myth, legend, stories. We make up who you are because we're guessing, because it's those other aspects of who you are that are going to be the tiebreakers. Are you resilient? Are you ruthless? Sometimes that's an asset. Are you many other qualities? You need to know who you are, and you need to be in a position to present that to other people. And that's why we come full circle back to powerful communication, being able to communicate powerfully. One of the reasons it's so important for you to know who you are is because every day you go around carrying a picture of yourself in your mind's eye. You have no idea how often you picture yourself. If you formalize that, as I do with the women I teach in these executive classes, you end up realizing you're carrying this picture, and when you've done your work on influences and traits and studied your history and your behavior, you can write yourself a really different picture. And when you carry that picture in your mind's eye, you communicate it in everything you do. It is really cool. So Marie is in one of my classes, and she is actually from a very matriarchal family. So the women run the show in her family. And in fact, when one of the people in the family had mortgage problems, they all got together and took it over. So her picture when she came to me was a mother hen with all these little chicks underneath. I do not love this picture. I said, Marie, you run this creative group and you've done all these things. Is this really who you are, mother hen? And she started doing her journey, her self-investigation. And she remembered a time she walked into her family and said, I'm going on a trip around the world. She didn't come back for 18 months. Not very mother hen-like. Once she got a glimpse of that person that wasn't so permissible in her home life, she was sitting in a meeting, these guys were trying to pick who to promote, and they weren't even looking at her. Marie stood up and said, I'll take it. I'll take it. They were so astounded they gave it to her. Do you know what she calls that trait that she had to do this homework for? Covert bravery. That's beautiful, isn't it? So here's the trap as you learn and seek to see yourself more clearly. There will be expectations laid on you that you should be womanly. Womanly is given to us by myth, by fairy tales, by our parents. In Maria's case, by her true family's orientation. What's womanly? You're collaborative, you're the peacekeeper, you're the one that knits everything together, you build great teams, you're friendly and loyal. Now I sound like a dog. These are fabulous attributes, but they slow you down at work if you allow them to be in lieu of being leaderly. Womanly versus leaderly. I made up that word, leaderly. It's close. Covert bravery is Marie being leaderly. In you lies dimensions and edginess and fierceness and bravery that you haven't yet let loose. So one of the things you want to do is start moving the fog away about whether you're supposed to be womanly while the guy's down the hall negotiating his promotion. So you could just drop modesty, please, which is one of those womanly words. It's not that you have to scorch the earth. It's that you have to stand for this one person who has no other voice, and that's you. So you might think about some of these palate cleansers that I have persuaded myself are very important to how we see ourselves. You are not the person at work you are at home. You see how liberating that is? You get to be someone else at work. And that's one of the reasons I think the women I meet love their work. Not everything, but they love this chance to experience themselves in a totally different way. You have to learn to step out in front of the work. Even my most advanced executive women in the seminars stand behind their PowerPoints. Who is that? You are not the work. You step out in front of the work because it's you who interprets, analyzes, and delivers the work that matters. Now that's the last thing. If you're not the work, what are you? You are the fuel, the energy, the system that delivers the work, that gets it seen and recognized. The way you do that is not like the men, and maybe not much like one another. It is your unique delivery system. It's made up of who you are, what you believe, what you feel, and what you think. And the reason you need to practice getting that part of you out is because one day that will be on the line. Because the other two parts of the three-legged stool, clarity, so personal clarity is a journey you start today. From the inside out, explaining who you are, watching how you behave, watching what causes your reactions. That constellation is operating all the time, and everybody who works with you knows it. So you need to know it better than they do. But now there's personal clarity, there's memorability. Of what is memorability made? Memorability means that somebody actually can hear you. We spend so much time thinking about what we want to say. Here's the golden rule of communication. It's not what you say, it's what they hear. And you work on not what you want to say, but the response you wish to evoke. That is a powerful discipline. And you do one other thing, which is really hard for women and terribly difficult for me in my early days. Edit, edit, edit. You eliminate everything but the complete center of the communication. Marion, I'm not leaving here until you and I agree to unite, is clear. It's memorable. Now, why is it persuasive? It's persuasive because my whole career was on the line and I was willing to show it. There will come a time when you have to cross a threshold where the relationships around you mean more than the work. And you have to be ready to deal. So 6 years later, we are very successful at Tatham, and this beer baron invites me to have a drink with him in New York or dinner. We've just gotten this huge account. We're hot stuff. I meet him at the 21 Club. He says, get rid of your car. I have a car. And I went to my driver and said, follow me. Texas girls always have an exit plan. We're in the elevator, we're going up, we're in the car, and he slaps down his hand and he says, I forgot my papers, let's stop at the hotel. He invites me to come see the company apartment. I think the guys will love seeing it. I go with him up the elevator. In the elevator, I realize Howard is drunk. And you can imagine that just completely unnerved me. We walk into a dark apartment. He grabs my arm. He says, let me show you around. I stumble onto a bed, and Howard falls on top of me. In less than 20 minutes, I am lying underneath a client I have only met. Terrified and ashamed, knowing that no one would believe I came there innocently. Where are all my words? And then I remembered how I learned who I was, how hard we worked. And I said, Howard, push. You don't want to do this. And to my surprise, Howard rolled like a ball over to the end of the bed, and I ran. Now, that's not the communication test. I have to not lose this account, and I have to deal with how furious and pained I am. I call Howard early in the morning. My hand is shaking, but he can't see me. And I say, Howard, you were not yourself last night. On the other end of the line. Very important sentence. I spent all night thinking about that sentence. I can't work with you anymore. I'll give you a new team. And Howard, I expect this arrangement to go very well between our two companies, right? And Howard says, yes, yes. And I said, one more thing. You'll never hear of this episode again. And Howard said, thank you. Thank you. So the business went beautifully. I never did see Howard again. But in that moment, I was personally clear. The remarks were memorable. I gave Howard a quid pro quo he couldn't mistake. And we moved on. Now, you might handle it very differently, because how you handle these kind of crises, these kind of relationships, maybe it won't be a soap opera, but you will have it happen to you. Because when you take a step out in front of the work, where are you? You're in no man's land. There is no proof that you're going in the right direction. What you want to be able to do is be personally clear that you believe in this and you intend to do it. You want to have mastered the art of communication in such a way that you are absolutely going to be heard. And you're persuasive because you've got huge skin in the game. It's what you believe. It's who you are. You're prepared to gamble. You're convinced, committed, and passionate. And you're willing to show it. Do you know how hard that is to do? So how do you get ready for those kinds of tests? You get ready by making every memo, every email, every communication you do, at least strive for that. Because one day, because you're going to be women of power, because you intend to have influence, because you're going to make changes, you're going to push new ideas, you're going to press the frontier, you're going to have to be a powerful communicator. And I would like you to be ready. Thank you.